Okay, I'm going to start this morning by officially welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Kap, Sawadee Kap, welcome to Wat Tung. Nice to see you guys here. This is what we call our Pali Canon and English study group. Each Saturday I get together and I study the words of the Buddha with students. We have other programs as well, which are kind of more foundational programs. Like on Sunday and Wednesday, we have our group learning program. We have various courses and retreats throughout the month and throughout the year that helps people build a foundation. This program is one that students usually come into after they've already developed a foundation in the teachings of the Buddha. If you haven't done that, it's okay. You'll still benefit from what we do today. We usually start with a meditation in order to help you to learn how to meditate and train your mind. And then afterwards, we'll move into the Pali Canon and English study group, and I'll show you guys how that works. So once again, welcome to those of you guys here. Welcome to everyone online who's joining us. If you'd like to join for meditation, you can do this in the seated, lying, standing position. There's also a walking position that people learn at different times. If you'd like to do the walking position, we have space in the back if you'd like to do walking meditation. So the way that I start the meditation is I start with a chant. We have these chants that are on a laminated sheet over there on the table. You're welcome to help yourself to get the chants. They're in the Pali language. This chanting, it's not a rite or ritual or a ceremony or worship. It's literally just to help ease the mind into meditation and get more benefit out of the meditation. There's nothing mystical or magical about these chants. It's not a prayer or worship or anything like that. I suspect the Buddha didn't even actually create these chants. They were probably created by his students either during his life or after his death, because if you read the English translations, you'll see there's a lot of respect and gratitude and admiration for the Buddha. So I'm going to ease us into meditation with the chanting, and you guys are welcome to join along if you know these chants, or if you'd like to learn them, you can see them on the paper there. And then after the chanting, I will share some guidance so that you guys understand how to meditate when we're actually in meditation. But then there'll be a period of time where I won't be talking. It'll just be quiet and we'll just be meditating. Those of you here, those of you guys online, would just be meditating together. I'm sure you hear an occasional sound. You know, there might be a dog barking, a bird chirping. It sounds like we've got some construction going on outside today. This is all impermanence. You can't have permanent quietness. There you go, on cue, right? That you can't have permanent quietness. It's not possible. So if you don't have craving for things to be a particular way, no matter what's happening, you can be content. So we know that this sound is impermanent. It's not going to last permanently. So occasionally you're going to hear a saw today, and that's okay, right? It's actually really good to challenge the mind and test the mind that way so that you can maintain your contentedness despite the impermanence of the world and things that are around you. So after we meditate for that period of time, then we're going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting, and then I'll move into sharing the teachings with you guys that we do on Saturday. So if you need a cushion, or you need chairs, you need or if you need a chanting sheet, feel free to get that at any point. If you're on the floor, usually students like to sit with their legs lightly crossed. Some people even like to put their legs off the mat. This gets the hips up in the air and lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles. And then the hands and the arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. But this practice isn't about everyone doing it exactly the same way, because it's not actually possible. Not everyone's going to find the same things comfortable. So there's other options too. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs, or their knees, or their palms up, or maybe just resting their hands in their lap. And some people like to sit in chairs during their meditation, and sometimes they like to just put their feet flat on the floor or cross at the ankles, and then again your hands and arms wherever is comfortable. So you just make yourself comfortable. There isn't just one way to put your body. You would like the body to be comfortable, not painful and not luxurious, but comfortable. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. It also helps you to breathe into the lungs. So if you have your sternum up and your shoulders back, you can get some nice deep breaths as you're breathing during meditation. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with some chanting, and you're welcome to join along, and then I'll be back with some guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakeva Bhutang Mahakevanang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled. Just a gradual inhale through the nose, establishing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Experiencing the full breath. And then when you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. Whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in gradually through the nose, establishing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then when you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาพุทธังภะคะวันตังอะภิวาเทมิ สวากขาโตภะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิ สุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามิ นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมโมสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ If you guys would like to make your way out of meditation, I'll once again welcome all of you guys. Those of you guys that joined us since we started meditating here at the temple, and those of you guys online, welcome to everyone. This is called breathing mindfulness meditation. This is a primary form of training that is used in addition to other things to get the mind to move to this enlightened mental state. What the enlightened mental state is where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll no longer experience any anger, no sadness or frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, any kind of loneliness or boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of that is eliminated from the mind because you've uprooted the causes and conditions that are producing it. There are certain pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind that when you understand what those are and you uproot them and eliminate them out of the mind, you won't experience discontentedness anymore. You won't even have the slightest displeasure. You're always in a good mood. You're never even in a bad mood anymore. You'll notice that you have focus, concentration, clarity, deep memory. You'll notice your personal and professional relationships will blossom. There won't be this harshness or bitterness or animosity or arguments in your relationships. But if you don't know how to do that, then you're not able to do that. The mind has this unknowing of true reality. So the Buddha's teachings, it's not about believing a bunch of things. It's not about rites or rituals or ceremonies or worship. It's about learning teachings, investigating them, examining them. It's about reflecting on them to independently verify them and practice them so you can uproot these pollutions out of the mind. So while meditation is very important and it's a priority in one's life in order to get to enlightenment, there's other things you need to learn as well. well, and that's what today is all about. Today is our Pali Canon in English study group, where we study the original words of the Buddha. This is a 1.5 year program that I go through volumes 2 of this book series that I share, all the way through volume 13. And in these books, you can learn the original words of the Buddha, and you can see words from me that are helping you to reflect on that and implement it into your life, and to be able to get benefit out of the words of the Buddha. The students will typically start with one of our foundational programs, which goes through the first book of the book series. We have the group learning program, which is every Sunday and Wednesday at 9 a.m. here at the temple, and I live stream it. And it's also at 9 p.m. I do it from home, and I live stream that as well. So that's usually where students will typically start. And we also have courses and retreats like the Foundation and the Path to Enlightenment, Harmony in Relationships, Experiencing the Jhanas and the 4 stages of enlightenment, and I have various retreats that I teach as well here and other places in the world. So these are retreats and courses that'll help you build a real foundation, and then students will typically move into this Pali Canon English study group to be able to learn the original words of the Buddha. So the way that this program works is I have these books, volumes 1 through 13, but in this program we study volumes 2 through 13. This is more of a study group, where all the other programs I teach, it's more of a traditional style of learning, where I will be teaching maybe 15-20 minutes and then opening up for questions from students, and then teach another 20-30 minutes, open up for questions for students. But this is more of a study group, where what I do is I invite you guys here at the temple, and those of you guys that are joining on Zoom, that if you guys would like to read this chapter out loud. This one is less than a page. You can see they're very short chapters. These are excerpts from the original discourses of the Buddha. The original discourses can be very long and really encompassing 10, 15, 20 different teachings sometimes. But what this book series does is it extracts that and gives you kind of like 1 or 2 or 3 golden nuggets in each little excerpt that the Buddha was teaching. And then what I do is, after a student will read this particular chapter, then I will share some teachings on that for maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes or so, and then I'll open up to any questions that you guys have, and then we move on to the next chapter. And students can be studying this before class and or after class, because you've got the original words of the Buddha here, but you also have a reference back to the original source teachings in the Pali Canon. If you would like to see what the Buddha was talking about before this or after this, you can go back using that reference, and it'll help you to see what he was talking about before or after this. And then you've got words from me. This one's very short, but some of them are quite long, where I'm explaining more about what are the reflections and ways you can use this and to benefit you in life. So these are things that you can be reading, because these books are available at no cost on our website. You can download them for free. You can take them and go print them. You can get printed versions here at the temple by just reimbursing us for the cost, or you can go to Amazon and you can order them through Amazon if you have access to Amazon. So is there someone here that would like to read this, or someone on Zoom that would like to read this particular chapter? Kushi's going to read. So we have these microphones that if you're going to read or you ask a question, if you could use the gray switch, there's a button on the front, and then the lights come on. You just wait a second or two and hold it up to your chin. That way we'll be able to hear you at our temple, and the people online will be able to hear you as well. And for those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or in Zoom you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions you like. And for those of you guys in Zoom, you can also volunteer to read by raising your hand and then opening up your mic, and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple, and they'll be able to hear you on the live stream reading as well. So thank you, Koshi.
The mother's milk. Monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not identifiable of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and fettered by craving. What do you think, monks? Which is more, the mother's milk that you have drunk as you roamed and wandered on through this long course, this or the water in the 4 great oceans? As we understand the teachings taught by the perfectly enlightened one, Venerable Sir, the mother's milk that we have drunk as we roamed and wandered on through this long course, this alone is more than the water in the four great oceans. Good, good monks, it is good that you understand the teachings taught by me in such a way. The mother's milk that you have drunk as you roamed and wandered through this long course, this alone is more than the water in the four great oceans. For what reason? Because, monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not identifiable of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and fettered by craving. For such a long time, monks, you have experienced discontentedness, misery, and disaster, and swelled the cemetery. It is enough to experience the fading away of strong feelings towards all conditions, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them.
Okay, thank you, Kushi. So this book that we're studying, this is actually chapter 111 of this book. This is volume 11 of the book series, and this volume is titled Realms of Existence. This is where you're learning about the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirits, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. The way that the Buddha taught is he didn't teach about belief. Even the cycle of rebirth and these 5 realms of existence, you can independently verify that they're true and that they truly exist. You might not have the wisdom to know how to do that right now, but that's something that students will typically move into. By the time they get to this book, they usually have been studying with me for about 1.5 or 2 years. They've developed a foundation, and now they're moving into studying the cycle of rebirth and the 5 realms of existence. The Buddha taught not the way the world should be, and if everybody follows these rules, then the world will become peaceful. Instead, he taught the way the world is. And by understanding the way the world is, you'll navigate that world more readily, more peacefully. But when you don't understand the world that you live in, it'll be quite difficult and quite challenging for you. You'll struggle. You have difficulties living in that world. So the unenlightened mind has what the Buddha is describing here as this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality. This is what is causing the mind to stay stuck in the unenlightened state, that it lacks wisdom about the natural laws of existence. It lacks wisdom about the world around you. So one of the first teachings that the Buddha taught is about the universal truth of impermanence, how there's nothing that is permanent around you. So that's why, like right now, it's a particular sound here, but then occasionally we hear a saw, right? This is impermanence. So that now we hear that saw, but that saw is impermanent too. But if you crave things to be one particular way permanently, then you'll be annoyed, or you'll be frustrated, or you'll be angry, or some other discontent feeling when things aren't the way you want them to be in the world. But things can't be the way you want them to be permanently in the world. So here the Buddha is talking about the cycle of rebirth, that beings are hindered by ignorance, meaning they have this obstruction. They can't get to the peace and the joy because they lack wisdom. And they're fettered by craving, meaning that this craving, this desire, this longing, yearning, wanting things to be a certain way. When you get things the way you want, you get pleasant feelings like happy, excited, elated, thrill, euphoria. But when things happen the way that you don't want to occur, you'll get angry or frustrated or irritated or annoyed or feeling some other discontent feeling. You'll get stress and anxiety. But you can eliminate all of that from the mind if you understand how to do it. And that's what the teachings are teaching you. They're teaching you the way the world is, helping you to understand your mind. The Buddha didn't teach rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. He didn't teach rules and commandments. He's teaching you the way that your mind functions. He's teaching you the way the world functions. And now with that wisdom, you can train your mind to improve more and more and more. The reason why he taught the cycle of rebirth in these 5 realms of existence is that as you're awakening your mind and removing more and more pollution out of your mind, there's a potential that you might observe your past lives. And if you start observing your past lives and you start noticing these things, you might think you're going crazy if you didn't understand the way the world is, that you've lived many, many different lives in the past. You might start having vivid memories of being murdered or raped or something like that. And you know it didn't happen in this life, but this could really shake you up if you didn't realize that these are just past memories from your past lives. So you can train your mind to let that go. Or you might actually end up experiencing communication with beings that are in the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirits, of course, the human realm, the heavenly realm. These beings can communicate with you. And if you didn't understand these 5 realms, you could be really really shaken up as you start experiencing communication from them. Or some people can actually see these beings. In the hell realm, the afflicted spirit realm, and the heavenly realm, these are formless beings that they don't have physical form, but some people can actually see these beings. If you didn't understand the cycle of rebirth in the 5 realms and you started having these experiences, you could be really shaken up by it. So the Buddha's not teaching you these things about the cycle of rebirth and the 5 realms of existence because he wants you to believe in these things. He's teaching it to you because that's the way the world is. And as you start having various experiences in the world, this is explaining it to you so your mind doesn't get shaken up and you don't feel like you're going insane. So here he's talking about the cycle of rebirth because in this particular book, we've already studied the chapters that are relating to the hell realm, animal realm, afflicted spirit, human realm, and heavenly realm. And now these chapters are related to the cycle of rebirth in general. And what he's essentially sharing with you is that you keep roaming and wandering through this continuous cycle of rebirth over and over and over and over and over again because there's this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality that you lack wisdom of how to train your mind to eliminate this craving. This is what's causing the rebirth. The craving is the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. Oh, I just got to have that brand new pair of shoes. Oh, I just want that new pair of shoes. If I get that new pair of shoes, everything's going to be perfect in my life. Or if I just get that new job, oh, I just got to have that new job. Or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, oh, I just got to have that. I got to have that. I got to have that. The mind thinks the external thing is going to provide some lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases and chases and chases, and it's holding on to this world. And as long as the mind's doing that, you're going to experience discontentedness, where you're going to be angry and sad and frustrated and irritated and annoyed and all these other discontent feelings. And you're going to continue to experience rebirth, coming back into the world over and over and over again, because you haven't learned what you need to learn in this world to escape this world and escape this cycle of rebirth. So the Buddha is explaining to you here essentially how you've been roaming and wandering through this long course of the cycle of rebirth. And he's explaining to you essentially that you've had countless rebirths, because he's saying, what do you think, monks, which is more, the mother's milk you have drunk as you roamed and wandered through this long course, meaning in all these different existences, you've been drinking mother's milk for all these countless existences? What do you think is more, that or the water in all the 4 great oceans? And then his students reply back and say, the mother's milk that you drank is much more than the water in the 4 great oceans. So you know how much water is on this planet. I think about 70% or 80% of the planet is water. So if you can imagine that the milk that you've drunk is way more than all of that water, you've had countless rebirths in many, many, many different lives. And the Buddha is saying that a discoverable beginning of this cycle of rebirth, meaning trying to figure out when the cycle of rebirth started, is undiscoverable. You can't figure it out. Like right now, scientists tell us that the Earth has been here for about 4.5 billion years. That's what they say, most scientists. There's some people who say less, some people say more, but generally they're saying about 4.5 billion years. We can't fathom that amount of time. In our 60 or 100 years that we're alive, we can't fathom how long that would actually be. But if you can imagine, for 4.5 billion years, beings have been being reborn over and over and over and over and over and over again. This is when we generally think the Earth existed, but the Earth is just one planet in an entire universe, entire galaxy. There's much more that exists in this world than just the Earth. So we don't know when the world started. And the Buddha is explaining this to you because sometimes that's a question that people crave to know. When did everything start? Why am I here? What is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of that? Well, the Buddha is essentially helping you see, like, hey, look, you've been roaming and wandering in this world for such a long time. You're craving to know all these things. You're craving to understand all these things. You know what? Just focus on getting to enlightenment. That's what he's saying right here. He's saying, it's enough to experience fading away of strong feelings towards all conditions, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them. He's saying you don't need to know the answer to when the world started or when the beginning of the cycle of rebirth started. You're in this existence as a human being now. Your mind is discontent. You experience anger and sadness and frustration and all these other discontent feelings. It's enough to just focus on getting to liberation, cultivating your mind, getting free from these strong feelings and escaping it. When you get to the peace and the joy you'll be completely fulfilled. But you can't get to that peace and joy as long as the mind has this ignorance and this craving, desire, attachment. So you need to learn how to cultivate wisdom. That's what's going to lead to your enlightenment. So that's why I teach students not to believe anything that I say. Don't believe anything in the books that I write. Don't believe anything you hear related to the teachings of the Buddha or anything else. Because with belief, you don't know it's true or false. You would like to get to wisdom, where you know the truth of what is true reality. And that's what you can get to when you study the teachings of the Buddha, where you're learning them, reflecting on them to independently verify and practice. You can get to the truth and you can see the wisdom of how the world is. Not the way the world should be, but how the world is. And now you can navigate this world more readily. Okay, any questions on this chapter? The mother's milk. Edmund has a question. Yes, sir.
Thanks, David. I suspect it's different. We're all different, aren't we? But it seems to me the attachment is very much a reductive process.
Say again, I'm sorry.
Being free of attachment seems to me to be a very reductive process. Mm-hmm. It's an elimination thing. I find it very difficult to retain certain things in my life without feeling any attachment. It seems the most obvious choice to make would be to maybe eliminate things. Mm-hmm. I find attachment is my natural kind of propensity. Mm-hmm. I can attach to a lot of things, mm-hmm. Just hopefully that they're good, But do you think that's right? I mean, I know, I anticipate you saying, no, it's okay to enjoy certain things and certain people, but don't get attached to them. I find that very difficult.
Yeah, you're going to find it very difficult now because your mind isn't fully trained, right? You're in the process of becoming to the point where you can train your mind. So if you build up your breathing mindfulness meditation, your generosity, you build up all the Eightfold Path and all those other things, that's where your mind gets more and more trained. But in the process of getting there, you're going to have attachment because you've had attachments before and they're still there in the mind. It's kind of like a trash heap, the way the unenlightened mind is. And when you clear off the top of the trash heap, you fall down to the next layer of trash, and you clear that off and you fall down to the next layer of trash. Or another way to think about it is like an onion. You're kind of peeling away this onion, and the outer layers are kind of easy to peel away. And as you get to more and more into the core, it's harder to peel away. But there's actually a lot of truth in what you're saying, because the less stuff that you have, the less likely the mind will be to become attached, because you don't have all these possessions and all these things. So it's not uncommon for someone who gets onto the path to enlightenment to start clearing out their life in terms of like their material possessions and relationships and things like this. They kind of start clearing that stuff out for a while, and they kind of come down to like a bare bones minimum, and then they kind of training their mind. And then as they train their mind more and more and more over many months and years, then they kind of expand back out and they start making friends again. They start kind of developing more relationships in the community and things like that. But the mind is a master at attaching. The untrained mind is a master at being attached and craving, and that's really what all it really knows how to do when it's untrained. So if you like to eliminate a lot of your possessions or relationships, you can do that. But you need to be very conscious about how you're doing that to make sure you have what it is that you need to sustain your life, and that you're not just walking away from otherwise pretty healthy relationships. You might need to kind of just distance yourself a little bit, allow your mind to do this work for an extended period of time, and then you kind of expand back out. The way that I think about it is like a bow tie, that when we were young children, our life was like wide open. We could spend time with anybody and everybody, and we could play and we could have all kinds of fun because our mind didn't have a lot of expectations, a lot of cravings. But then over time, as we had more and more cravings and expectations, what we wanted other people to do became more and more. So the number of people we could spend time with became fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer because our expectations increased. So then as you're bringing your life down, you kind of get into the knot of the bow tie. And this is where you're doing the work to train your own mind. And then as you do, then you start expanding back out the other side of the bow tie. And you get to the point where you can spend time with everybody and anybody, and you can be completely peaceful and joyful and harmonious no matter who you're spending time with. This is what essentially the life cycle of moving from unenlightened to enlightened as a child, and then kind of coming into the knot, doing that inner work, and then expanding back out. So how much you choose to shed away and actually eliminate the possessions and relationships is up to you. But you ultimately can get to a point where you have plenty of relationships, you have plenty of different things that you're involved in, but you're just not attached to them. You can train your mind to enjoy something without being attached to it. But that's challenging for the mind, especially as you're first getting going. I think you've been studying for a few months now, or a couple of months. That's normal that somebody feels like they maybe need to shed things in order to kind of go internal and really do that inner work. And then they kind of expand back out. And if that's what you'd like to do, then feel free. Those are decisions for you to make. And I think you've already been doing that in your life, is kind of shedding things even before you started learning here. And this is sometimes what the mind does, is it doesn't really know the wisdom of the path to enlightenment, but it just feels like all this stuff, I'm not interested in having all this stuff around. It's just too much of a burden. So the mind kind of starts figuring out a little bit of the path on its own. But once you really start learning the path, that's where you can really accelerate your growth in your learning and getting to enlightenment. Okay. If you guys online have questions, you can put them into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to see them here and answer any of your questions. Looks like we have a question here on YouTube. Yosef is asking, may you all find... Oh, okay. He's just saying nice things to all of you guys. He's saying, may you guys all find peace and love. May all the efforts lead to permanent happiness. He's wishing you all to get to enlightenment. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 112. Is there someone who would like to volunteer reading this? This is a very short chapter. For those of you guys that are just learning English, this is a great time for you to practice your English, to do a little bit of reading. Anybody would like to read? Yes, sir. If you could get a mic there. Yeah.
In misfortune, in misery, in this long course, monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not identifiable, of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and fettered by craving. Whenever you see anyone in misfortune, in misery, you can conclude, we too have experienced the same thing in this long course. For what reason? Because, monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not identifiable, of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and fettered by craving. For such a long time, monks, you have experienced discontentness, misery, and disaster, and swelled the cemetery. It is enough to experience fading away of strong feelings towards all conditions, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them.
Okay, thank you, sir. This is very similar to the previous chapter, but the Buddha is honing in on something else here. And if you understand what he's teaching, this can actually arise a lot of compassion in your mind. And you're going to need to arise compassion in order to get to enlightenment. What compassion is concern for the misfortune of others. And what the Buddha is teaching you is that whenever you see somebody experiencing misfortune or some unfortunate situation, he's saying you too have experienced that exact same thing. Because you've been reborn for so many countless times in the past, whatever you see somebody experience something, you've experienced that exact same thing. So it can help you arise compassion, which is concern for the misfortune of others, but it can also help you eliminate judgment, which is part of your conceit. If you have arrogance or conceit in the mind, the ego, you might judge other people. You're like, look at that guy. He's using alcohol. He's a drunk. Or look at that guy. He's homeless. He's not even able to afford food and he's living on the street. But what the Buddha is teaching you is, hey, you've experienced that exact same thing at some point in this long course of the cycle of rebirth. You were homeless at one time too. You were using alcohol at one time too. You were doing all these different things. things. So why judge other people for the very same things that you've done? Why not have concern for their misfortune, which is compassion? So if you can understand that you've been reborn countless times, when you see people in unfortunate circumstances, rather than judging them or looking down on them and thinking that you're so great, remind yourself, hey, I've experienced that exact same thing myself. And maybe you're not experiencing that right now at this point in your life, but you have experienced it at some point, either in this life or some prior life, and just have concern for their misfortune. And if that means you'd like to take action and try to help them, you might decide that you could do that. But in all situations, you're not going to be able to help people. So this can help you to eliminate your judgment and arise compassion, which are two things that you need to do on your journey to enlightenment. So any questions on this one? No? Okay. So let's move to chapter 113. Someone like to read this? Edmund's going to read. All right, sir.
In happiness, in fortune, in this long course. Monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. The first point is not identifiable of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and fettered by craving. Whenever you see anyone happy and fortunate, you can conclude, we too have experienced the same thing in this long course. For what reason? Because, monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. The first point is not identifiable of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and fettered by craving. For such a long time, monks, you have experienced discontentedness, misery, and disaster, and swelled the cemetery. It is enough to experience fading away of strong feelings towards all conditions, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them.
Okay, thank you, sir. So this is very similar to the last one, but it's the opposite side. It's showing you that, hey, anytime you see someone experiencing happiness or any kind of fortunate situation, you've experienced that too. And where this comes in is this helps you to eliminate your craving, desire, attachment. Say you have a craving to be famous or a celebrity, or say you have a famous to be, or a craving to be the president of your country, or say you have a craving for that Maserati or that Lamborghini, or some living in some mansion or something like this. You can conclude you've already done that. You've already done it in some previous life. So the Buddha is sharing this with you because it actually helps you to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments. It's like you've already done all these things. The goal would be to eliminate your cravings, no longer crave those things. And it also helps you to eliminate your jealousy, which is can be part of the conceit too, where you see somebody else is famous and celebrity. It's like, look at them just showing off. Like, I wish I could do that. Why is it got to be them? Why is it not me? Right? This is the way the mind can think sometimes. Look at that person with all that money. Look at them with the beautiful woman and the handsome guy. Oh, that should be me. So there can be that craving, which is producing the jealousy, which is the envy, where you're envying somebody else. So if you get rid of your cravings, then you can get to more peace and you can get to more joy and be like, hey, I'm living this life. This is a great life. This is really enjoyable. And you can train your mind to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments by realizing anything you see anybody else doing, you've already done it. So why do you have to crave to do it again and again and again and again? Just train your mind to get to the point where you can enjoy the life that you're currently living, and then build up your life to improve into improvements by making wiser and wiser decisions. So any questions on this one? Okay. I'm not seeing any questions, so let's go to chapter 114. Would somebody like to read this one? Yes, sir. That's great. You guys are sharing the mics around.
The stream of blood. Monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not identifiable of being roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and knowing of true reality, and fettered by craving. What do you think, monks? Which is more, the stream of blood that you have shed when you are you were beheaded as you roamed and wandered on through this long course. This, or the water in the four great oceans. As we understand the teachings taught by the perfectly enlightened one, Venerable Sir, the stream of blood that we have shed when our heads were cut off as we roamed and wandered on through this long course. This alone is more than the water in four great oceans. Good, good, monks. It is good that you understand the teachings taught by me in such a way. The stream of blood that you have shed as you roamed and wandered on through this long course, this alone is more than the water in the four great oceans. For a long time, monks, you have been cause, and when as cause you were beheaded, the stream of blood that you shed is greater than the water in the four great oceans. For a long time, you have been buffaloes, sheep, goats, deer, chickens, and pig. You were beheaded. The stream of blood that you shed is greater than the water in the four great oceans. For a long time, you have been arrested by burglars, highwaymen, and adulterers, and when you were beheaded, the stream of blood that you shed is greater than the water in the four great oceans. For what reason? Because, monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. A fourth point is not identifiable of being roaming and wandering on, hindered by the ignorance, and knowing of true reality, and fettered by craving. For such a long time, monks, you have experienced discontentedness, misery, and disaster, and swelled the cemetery. It is enough to experience fading away of strong feeling towards all. It is enough to experience fading away of strong feelings toward all conditions, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, so here, this is another discourse spoken in a slightly different way to explain this countless rebirths that you've been reborn over and over and over and over and over and over again. And you may not be able to see that yet at this point in time, but as you train your mind, you may get to the point where you see your past lives. And the Buddha is just helping you see, like, hey, been there, done that. You've done all these things. Why continue to stay in the cycle of rebirth? Train your mind, become motivated, become diligent and dedicated to escape this so you can get to the peace and the joy of the enlightened mind, and you don't have to keep coming back over and over and over again. So that's what he's essentially saying here. So any questions on this one? No? Okay. I'm not seeing any questions online either. So we'll move on to the next one. 115. Who would like to read this one? Sure.
Beings roaming and wandering on from this world to the other world and from the other world to this world. Monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not identifiable of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and knowing of true reality, and fettered by cravings. Just a stick thrown up into the air falls now on its bottom, now on its side, and now on its top. So too as beings roam and wander on, hindered by ignorance and knowing of true reality, and fettered by cravings. Now they go from this world to the other world. Now they come from the other world to this world. For what reason? Because, monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not identifiable of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance and knowing of true reality, and fettered by cravings. For such a long time, monks, you have experienced discontentedness, misery and disaster, and swelled the cemetery. Is it enough to experience fading away of strong feelings towards all conditions, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them?
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. So again, this is just another discourse that's being consolidated here, so you can see over and over and over again the Buddha is describing that this countless cycle of rebirth, the countless rebirths. So he didn't say all these on the same day necessarily. This is like spread out over his 45 years of teaching, and they're being consolidated here into this one book so that you can be able to see what they are. And it's the same essential teaching where he's just saying there's been these countless rebirths. You know, why continue to be reborn over and over and over again and experience all those miseries and grief and sorrow and despair where you can get liberated from that? That's what he's saying down here, that it's enough to experience the fading away of those strong feelings towards all conditions. The conditions that he's talking about is like, if it's sunny outside, you'll be happy. If it's raining outside, maybe you'll be sad. That's a conditional feeling. Whenever you have a conditional feeling, it's going to be temporary. It's going to arise, it's going to change, and then it's going to fade away. That's why you haven't been able to get to permanent happiness yet, because your mind is basing its inner feelings on some condition. And as long as that craving, desire, attachment is in there, I want it to be sunny. So when it's sunny, you'll be happy, you'll be excited. But then when it rains, you'll be frustrated or sad or irritated. If you eliminate craving, desire, attachment, you eliminate the mind going up and down like that, because your mind won't want things to be a certain way. You just understand that it is the way that it is, and all these things are impermanent. The sun is impermanent, but the rain's impermanent too. Your bank account's impermanent. It can't be the same level all the time. If you want your bank account to be here, when it goes down, you'll be sad, you'll be frustrated, because your mind is basing its inner feeling of happiness on a condition. The condition is my bank account's here, I'll be happy, right? And maybe when you were first growing up, if your bank account had $100 in it, you might have been happy. But then you wanted 500. But then you wanted 1,000. Then you wanted 5,000. Then you wanted 10,000. The mind just craves and craves. It's never enough. It's like an unquenchable thirst. It just wants more and more and more and more. So you can train your mind to not do that. You can train your mind to not base its inner feelings on some condition. So you can have that piece of chocolate cake and enjoy it, or you can have your green pants and enjoy them. But when they get ripped up and they're no longer around, you understand. Well, of course they're no longer wearable because they're impermanent. Or that hat you're wearing, you're going to eventually need, it's going to eventually get lost, it's going to get stolen, you're going to misplace it, it's going to fall apart, it's going to get old, something's going to happen to it, it's no longer going to be around. But when we hold on to these things, wanting them to be permanent, that's when you're going to have the painful feelings. So you understand that all these things around you are impermanent. And as long as you're not craving to them, then you can maintain your peace and your joy. So any questions on this one? Yes, sir.
What do you think is meant when the Buddha says it is enough to experience? Is there a difference between that and enlightenment? Or do you think it means it's enough in this lifetime just to experience that? Is it?
Yeah, he's saying it's enough to get to enlightenment. Meaning, when you get to enlightenment, you'll be completely fulfilled, completely satisfied. That's enough. Because in the unenlightened state, you can't fathom how peaceful and how joyful the mind truly is when it's in the enlightened mental state. If you've ever been somewhere where you've just been sitting and you've just been kind of maybe looking at a scenery and you're like, you know what? I don't need anything else. I don't want anything else. I can just sit here and just be content. I could be here for the rest of my life and everything would just be completely content. Or if you ever went to like a cabin in the woods and you're like, this is perfect. I could just be here for the rest of my life. I don't need anything. I don't want anything. And you're just utterly peaceful and joyful. That's almost like what we might say is temporary enlightenment, even though there's no such thing as temporary enlightenment. So what he's saying is the enlightened mental state is your mind is so peaceful, so joyful. That's enough that you won't want anything else in the world. You'll be completely fulfilled and completely satisfied. Like, getting free of those strong feelings, it's honestly the most wonderful thing that you could ever experience in life. So that's enough. You don't need all this other stuff in your life that the mind just keeps craving after and chasing after. So it's a matter of including things in your life and knowing that you need those things, but not being attached to them. But the mind doesn't know how to do that initially. You need to gradually train. It's easy to say, but it's really challenging to do. And that's where the training of the meditation and all the other training comes in on the Eightfold Path. Okay, let's see if we have any questions online here. Hello to everyone online that are joining us. Okay, so chapter 116. Someone like to read this? Edmund's volunteering you, Kushi. Hot potato.
So impermanent, so unstable, so unreliable conditions. Monks, this cycle of rebirth is without discoverable beginning. A first point is not identifiable of beings roaming and wandering on, hindered by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and fettered by craving. In the past, monks, this Mount Vipula was called Pachina Vamsa, and at that time these people were called Tivaras. The lifespan of Tivaras was 40,000 years. They could climb Mount Pachina Vamasa in 4 days and descend in 4 days. At that time, the perfectly enlightened one, Kakusanda, an Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one, has arisen in the world. His 2 chief disciples were called Vidura and Sanjiva, an excellent pair. See, monks, that name for this mountain has disappeared. Those people have died, and that fortunate one has attained final nibbana, final enlightenment. So impermanent are conditions, monks, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough, monks, to experience fading away of strong feelings towards all conditions, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them. At another time in the past, monks, this Mount Vipula was called Vankaka, and at that time these people were called Rohitasas. The lifespan of Rohitasas was 30,000 years. They could climb mountain Vankaka in 3 days and descend in 3 days. At that time, the perfectly enlightened one, Konagamana, an Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one, has arisen in the world. His 2 chief disciples were named Biosa and Uttara, an excellent pair. See, monks, that name for this mountain has disappeared. Those people have died, and that fortunate one has attained final nibbana, final enlightenment. So impermanent are conditions, monks, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough, monks, to experience the fading away of strong feelings towards all conditions, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them. At still another time in the past, the monks, this mountain Vipula was called Supasa, and at that time these peoples were called Supiyas. The lifespan of Supiyas was 20,000 years. They could climb Mount Supasa in 2 days and descend in 2 days. At that time, the perfectly enlightened one, Kasapa, an Arahant, the perfectly enlightened one, has arisen in the world. His 2 chief disciples were named Tissa and Bharadwaja, an excellent pair. See, monks, that name for this mountain has disappeared. Those people have died, and that fortunate one has attained final nibbana, final enlightenment. So impermanent are conditions, monks, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough, monks, to experience fading away of strong feelings towards all conditions, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them. At present, monks, this mountain Vipula is called Vipula, and at present this people are called Magadhans. The lifespan of Magadhans is short, limited, fleeting. One who lives long lives, 100 years or a little more. The Magadhans could climb Mount Vipula in 1 hour and descend in an hour. At present I have arisen in the world, an Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one. My 2 chief disciples are named Sariputta and Moggallana, an excellent pair. There will come a time, monks, when the name for this mountain will have disappeared, when these people have died, and I have attained final Nibbana, final enlightenment. So impermanent are conditions, monks, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough, monks, to experience fading away of strong feelings towards all conditions, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them. This is what the perfectly enlightened one said. Having said this, the fortunate one, the teacher, further said this. This is called Pachinavamasa by the Tivaras, and Vankaka by Rohitasas, Supasa by Supiya people, Vipula by Magadhan folk. Impermanent, are conditions subject to arising and vanishing. Having arisen, they are eliminated. Their calming is peaceful.
Okay, thank you, Kushi. So first, before I start talking about this discourse, I'll say this is the only conflict that I've ever seen in the entire Pali Canon, that here and some other places you can see where the Buddha is documented as having talked about Buddhas that existed before him, previous Buddhas. That's what he's talking about. And there's another place in the Pali Canon where he says he is the discoverer, the declarer, the originator of the path to enlightenment, undeclared before him, and that he's the one who figured out how to get to enlightenment. So that would imply that there were no Buddhas before him. And the more you understand about the path to enlightenment, you will see that it's very intellectual, that it requires a certain depth of understanding intellectually to understand the path and then to be able to accomplish enlightenment. And the Buddha lived over 2,500 years ago. Prior to the Buddha, we know that human beings were just trying to figure out how to talk and how to interact and communicate with each other. 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, 30,000 years ago, people weren't actually able to communicate in the same way that we are today with a language that is able to communicate intellectual knowledge and wisdom. So I suspect that by the time we got to 2,500 years ago, which the Buddha died in 483 BC, that was kind of the first time frame that language had developed to such an extent that we could communicate the path to enlightenment. So I don't suspect that there were any Buddhas prior to Gotama Buddha. I consider him to be the Buddha, the first and only Buddha up to that point, because of that reason. But you will see this conflict in the Pali Canon because the source teachings are 2,500 years old that he spoke them, and then they wrote them down shortly after his death. And now for 2,500 years, they've been handed down from person to person to person in these books. But the way that you cut through that impermanence to know what is true and what is false is you don't believe the teachings. You learn them, you reflect on them to independently verify them, and you practice them. And this is where you see the condition of your mind improving, and you can see that what you're learning in the teachings of the Buddha are the truth, that these translations that I have are very accurate translations. Whether there were Buddhas before Gotama Buddha or not, it really doesn't matter, because we have his teachings. Your mind is currently unenlightened, and you can use his teachings to be able to get to enlightenment. So whether there were Buddhas before him or not, it really doesn't matter at this point. So this is the one conflict that I've seen in the Pali Canon out of everything that I've seen. And there's 45 books that are like this big. I haven't read all of them, but there's about 45 of them about this big. It would take probably someone about good 10 years to probably read all of them, and then understanding it and practicing it and so forth and so on. But you don't need to read the entire Pali Canon in order to get to enlightenment. So that's why this book series that I have consolidates it so that it's very manageable, that over a period of about 2 years or so, you could be gradually reading it, gradually learning, gradually getting guidance from a teacher, and you can gradually be helping yourself to be able to get closer and closer to enlightenment. So this particular teaching, the Buddha is basically talking about the impermanent nature of the world, that things are constantly changing. And this is one of his core central teachings. So whether there's a Buddhas before him or not, it doesn't really matter. Here, we're getting some insight into him just talking about the impermanent nature of the world, where his other teachings on impermanence, when he talks about it and teaches it in a discourse, is very direct. But here he's just kind of talking about it in terms of history and all the different people and populations and civilizations that existed at one time or another. So any questions here on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's move to the next one, which is chapter 117. Someone would like to read this one? Sure. Yeah, we have some mics around.
Conditioned objects are impermanent. Monks, conditioned objects are impermanent. Conditioned objects are unstable. Conditioned objects are unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings towards them, enough to be liberated from them. Monks, Sinnaru, the king of mountains, is 84,000 yojanas in length. Yojana is 12 to 15 kilometers, and 84,000 yojanas in width. It is submerged 84,000 yojanas in the great ocean and rises up 84 yojanas above the great ocean. 1. There comes a time, monks, when rain does not fall for many years, for many hundreds of years, for many thousands of years, for many hundreds of thousands of years. When rain does not fall, seed life and vegetation. Medical plants, grasses and giant trees of the forests wither and dry up and no longer exist. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. 2. There comes a time when, after a long time, a second sun appears. With the appearance of the second sun, the small rivers and lakes dry up and evaporate and no longer exist. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. 3. There comes a time when, after a long time, a third sun appears. With the appearance of the third sun, the great rivers, the Ganga, the Yamuna, the Akiravata, the Sarabhuja, and the Mahi dry up and evaporate and no longer exist. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. 4. There comes a time when, after a long time, a fourth sun appears. With the appearance of the fourth sun, the great lakes from which those great rivers originate, Anotata, Siapatata, Ratakara, Kanamunda, Kunala, Chadanta, and Mandakini dry up and evaporate and no longer exist. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. 5. There comes a time when, after a long time, a fifth sun appears. With the appearance of the fifth sun, the waters in the great ocean sink by 100 yojanas, 200 yojanas, 300 yojanas, 400 yojanas, 500 yojanas, 600 yojanas, 700 yojanas. The water left in the great ocean stands at the heat of 7 palm trees, at the heat of 6 palm trees, 5 palm trees, 4 palm trees, 3 palm trees, 2 palm trees, a mere palm tree. The water left in the great ocean stands at the heat of 7 fathoms, 6 fathoms, 5 fathoms, 4 fathoms, 3 fathoms, 2 fathoms, a fathom, 1.8 meters, half a fathom, up to a waist, up to the knees, up to the ankles. Just as in the autumn, when thick drops of rain are pouring down, the water stands in the hoof prints of cattle here and there. So the waters left in the great ocean will stand here and there in pools in the size of hoof prints of cattle. With the appearance of the fifth sun, the water left in the great ocean isn't enough even to reach the joints of one's fingers. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. 6. There comes a time when, after a long time, a sixth sun appears. When the appearance of the sixth sun, this great earth and Sinnaru, the king of mountains, smoke, fume, and smolder. Just as a potter's fire, when kindled, first smokes, fumes, and smolders, so with the appearance of the sixth sun, this great earth and Sinnaru, the king of mountains, smoke, fume, and smolder. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. 7. There comes a time when, after a long time, a seventh sun appears. With the appearance of the seventh sun, this great earth and Sinnaru, the king of mountains, bursts into flames, blazes up brightly, and becomes one mass of flame. As the great earth and Sinnaru are blazing and burning, the flame, cast up by the wind, rises even to the Brahma world, heavenly realm. As Sinnaru is blazing and burning, it is undergoing destruction and being overcome by a great mass of heat. Mountain peaks of 100 yojanas disintegrate. Mountain peaks of 200 yojanas, 300 yojanas, 400 yojanas, 500 yojanas disintegrate. When this great earth and Sinnaru, the king of mountains, are blazing and burning, neither ashes nor soot are seen. Just as when ghee or oil are blazing and burning, neither ashes nor soot are seen. So it is when this great earth and Sinnaru, the king of mountains, are blazing and burning. So impermanent are conditioned objects, so unstable, so unreliable. It is enough to become dissatisfied with all conditioned objects, enough to become free from strong feelings toward them, enough to be liberated from them. Monks, who except those who have seen the truth would think or understand. This great earth and Sinnaru, the king of mountains, will burn up, be destroyed, and will no longer exist.
Okay, thank you so much. So here, what the Buddha is talking about is how things in the world are all impermanent around you. Things are constantly changing. This is a core central teaching. You need to understand this as the very beginning teaching, because what's causing the mind to be discontent is it's craving permanence. It wants things in the world to be permanent. This is why when grandma's alive, you're happy. But when she dies, you might be sad, because grandma is impermanent, but the mind's craving for her to be permanent. If you're in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, when you're together, you might be happy. But when you separate and the relationship's over, you're sad, because the mind's craving permanence, wanting things to be permanent in the world when everything around you is impermanent. And the Buddha is explaining that in relationship to the environment and all these other things. But it's not just the environment that's impermanent, it's anything you see, anything you hear, anything you smell, any flavor that's on your tongue, anything that comes into bodily contact, or anything that's in the mind, any thoughts or feelings, all those things are impermanent. So more and more you can be able to see that, and you can see your mind's craving permanence. This is the ultimate truth. But ultimately what he gets to all the way down here at the bottom, and thank you for reading such a long chapter, is he's saying, who, except those who have seen the truth, would think or understand? Meaning, Who except those who would understand the universal truth of impermanence would think or understand that this great earth is impermanent? Right? Sometimes we think that humanity is permanent, and the idea of humans no longer existing in the world really bothers some people because they crave for the world to be a certain way permanently. But if you understand the universal truth of impermanence and you can see everything around you is impermanent, then you know that this world is not going to be here permanently. It's not possible. Humanity is not permanent. The earth is not permanent. It's not possible for these things to be permanent. But oftentimes the mind's craving for those things to be permanent. So you can train your mind to let that go and realize that, okay, while I'm in this existence, I'm going to make wise decisions and go towards certain goals, objectives that I'm working towards. But all these things around you are impermanent. It's only when your mind craves permanence that you'll experience discontentedness. So any questions on this one? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's see what the next one is. The next one is 118. Would somebody like to read this one? Edmund's got it? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Not understanding and not penetrating the Four Noble Truth. Monks, just as a stick thrown up into the air falls now on its bottom, now on its top, so too as beings roam and wander on, hindered by ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and fettered by craving. Now they go from this world to the other world. Now they come from the other world to this world. For what reason? Because they have not seen the Four Noble Truths. What for? The noble truth of discontentedness, the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness, the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand this is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand this is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Monks, it is because of not understanding and not penetrating the Four Noble Truths that you and I have roamed and wandered through this long course of the cycle of rebirth. What for? It is, monks, because of not understanding and not penetrating the noble truth of discontentedness, the noble truth of the cause of discontentedness, the noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness, the noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness, that you and I have roamed and wandered through this long course of the cycle of rebirth. That noble truth of discontentedness, monks, has been understood and penetrated. The noble truth of the cause of discontentedness has been understood and penetrated. The noble truth of the elimination of discontentedness has been understood and penetrated. That noble truth of the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness has been understood and penetrated. Craving for existence has been cut off. The conduit to existence has been destroyed. Now there is no more renewed existence.
Okay, thank you, Edmund. So that those previous teachings were talking about the very first teaching of the universal truth of impermanence. You need to know that as a building block to help you understand the Four Noble Truths. But then the next teaching that you need to understand is the Four Noble Truths. Here, this isn't explaining what the Four Noble Truths is. This is the Buddha just pointing to it and saying, okay, that's the next piece that you need to understand the Four Noble Truths. So when I teach all the foundational programs, I start students off learning the three universal truths, and then I teach them the Four Noble Truths, because that's the real beginning of the path to enlightenment. That's what's explaining the problem in the unenlightened mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination, and the path forward, how to actually solve the entire problem. And the Buddha is saying the reason why you continue to be reborn over and over and over again is because you haven't seen the Four Noble Truths. You haven't understood them. You haven't had this breakthrough to understanding why your mind experiences discontentedness. And this is why it continues to experience discontentedness, because you don't understand what's causing it. You wouldn't be able to eliminate your anger and sadness and frustration if you didn't know what was causing it. Usually what the unenlightened mind believes is that other people are causing you to be angry, or other people are causing you to be frustrated. But other people aren't causing you to be angry. They're not causing you to be frustrated. In the Four Noble Truths, you can learn about how your own mind is causing your anger And this is why you can eliminate your anger, because it's your own mind that's actually causing it. But unless you learned and practiced the Four Noble Truths, you wouldn't know that. So that's what the Buddha is saying here, is that because people haven't seen the Four Noble Truths, they don't understand them, they're continuing to be reborn over and over and over and over again, because they're craving for existence. But for him, he's saying craving for existence has been cut off. The conduit to existence has been destroyed. The conduit to existence is craving, desire, attachment. By you eliminating craving, desire, attachment, your mind's going to be becoming more and more peaceful in this life. And then not only has your mind become peaceful and joyful in this life, but you've eliminated the causes and conditions that produce rebirth in the next life. So it's kind of like a 2-for-1, that if you solve craving, desire, attachment, you'll get more peaceful in this life and you won't experience continuous rebirth. And this is the beauty about the teachings of the Buddha, is that it's not about believing a bunch of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. When you're learning now and you're eliminating and applying the teachings to eliminate the craving, you can see your mind becoming more and more peaceful in this life. So you're actually experiencing the results now in this life, and your mind's becoming more and more peaceful. So there's no more renewed existence. This is very important to understand, that the Buddha taught that once you get to enlightenment, you're not going to be reborn in the cycle of rebirth. You're not going to be coming back in the cycle of rebirth. But once you get to enlightenment and die, he doesn't declare what happens next. He leaves this as an undeclared teaching. Some people look at this and they think, oh, well, if you get to enlightenment, that means that you don't exist. Well, there is no existence in the cycle of rebirth, meaning you're not coming into the hell realm, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm, the human realm, or the heavenly realm. But he doesn't declare what comes next after enlightenment, because let's just say there is something next. He didn't say there is something. He didn't say there isn't anything. But let's just say there is something next. And let's just say it's a really wonderful thing. And he described what that is. That's one more craving for you to eliminate in order to get to enlightenment. You're not going to be able to get to enlightenment if you have a craving for an afterlife. You need to get to the point where you're peaceful and joyful now, in the present moment. Whatever's happening right now, you're peaceful. You're not longing and yearning for this afterlife and thinking that that's where everything's going to be peaceful. You need to create peace now in this life. Enjoyment now, and have this joy in your mind. So that's why he doesn't declare what does come next or what doesn't come next. But he does share that there's no renewed existence, meaning there isn't existence in the cycle of rebirth. These are two different things. Okay? Any questions on this one? Yes, sir. If you could use your mic for the question.
Yeah, and I was thinking in a way that's also already accounting for this life, that if you get enlightened, then you have a peaceful state of mind, what is very easy to long for, to have craving for. So in that way, it's also what you just mentioned about that maybe afterlife stage. It's also counting for this life.
Yeah,
this
is one of the cravings that people sometimes have to eliminate, that they crave enlightenment itself, let alone what might come after enlightenment. So if somebody has a craving for enlightenment, a longing and yearning for it, they won't actually be able to experience it. So they need to eliminate that. And there's ways to do that. Like one of the things that I share is that sometimes we talk about attaining enlightenment, and you need to attain it. And oftentimes the mind can crave it because it feels like, I don't have this thing, I want this thing, so I'm going to chase after it. And this is where the mind can oftentimes crave the peace and the joy of the enlightened mental state. Another way to think about enlightenment is you can think about it as your mind is already enlightened, but you have these pollutions that are hindering you from being able to experience that. And you got to clear out this pollution out of your mind so the brightness and the radiance of the enlightened mind can shine through. Because oftentimes if you think about that you've already got something, you just need to clean it out so that you can experience it and enjoy it more and more. Then it can help you to not crave something and not to chase after it. Where we typically talk about it as attaining enlightenment, but one of the ways you can think about it is you're already enlightened and you just need to clear out the pollution, and so that you can experience those qualities of enlightenment more and more. And this definition and this description actually is more fitting, because what you'll see as you're making your way to enlightenment is you'll see, like, you'll go 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, where you'll be completely peaceful and completely joyful. And then, boom, there'll be some discontentedness that comes in. And you'll notice that that time of the peace and the joy expands. You can even go 3 months, 6 months sometimes where you're quite peaceful. And then something happens and then boom, you experience a bit of discontentedness. But it's very short-lived. It's very insignificant. You know what it is. You can cut it off and let it go. So you might notice this as you're making your way to enlightenment. And this is kind of more indicative of the idea that you're already enlightened, but you've got these pollutions that are standing in the way of you being able to experience that. So that's one of the ways to eliminate any craving for enlightenment itself, that you just work towards it as a goal, as an objective or an interest. And that'll help you to eliminate any craving for it. But you also need to be sure you're not indifferent. And you're like, who cares? I'm just going to be angry for the rest of my life. I don't care how I treat other people. It doesn't matter. Each side of this, your mind's not going to be peaceful. If you're craving it, chasing after enlightenment, but also if you're indifferent, you're going to become complacent and lethargic in terms of developing your mind, developing your life. So you'd like to come to the middle where you're gradually working towards it as a goal, objective, or interest. Mm-hmm. Anything else you guys would like to discuss on this one? Okay, so let's go to the next one. We're almost done here. So now we're moving out of the section of the cycle of rebirth, and now the Buddha is going to share teachings with you on enlightenment itself, nibbana. Let me see what chapters these are. Okay, yeah, we should be able to finish up these two. Would somebody like to read this one?
Sorry, David, could I just have one quick question on the other one?
Yeah, sure.
Always talk about craving and attachment. Is that very different from aversion? It just feels very different to me. It's like, maybe like I was saying earlier, there's something about elimination as I'm starting out on this path, questioning the value of things in my life, and if I'm overly attached. So I can become averse. If dealing with aversion seems a lot more complicated and I can crave a yacht or a big palace, It's just folly. It just seems silly.
Yes.
But being averse to illness and fading health, that's a lot closer and more personal, isn't it?
Okay, so when someone's first starting to learn with me, I talk about craving, desire, attachment, wants, expectations. I describe this all as the same thing. But there's actually two different things that are happening here. The mind is craving, where it's longing, it's yearning, it's craving those pleasant feelings. It's craving for things to be permanent. And then when it gets what it wants, it clings. This is what we call attachment or holding. You're clinging to something, like maybe that shirt or that hat or the pants or your mother or your dad, or you're holding on to them, wanting them to be permanent. So there's a craving for it, which is the longing, the yearning. Then there's the clinging, which is the holding on to it. These are two different things. But I describe it all as one thing when someone's first getting started because it's easier to understand it. When you're craving, if you get what you want, you get those pleasant feelings, the peace, the happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But when those painful feelings are arising, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, all those painful feelings, this is where the mind has aversion, and it tries to push the person, or it pushes the situation away. And it thinks that that's going to solve the problem. If I push this person away, if I push the situation away, the unenlightened mind with a lack of wisdom thinks that solves the problem. Because the mind's misunderstanding what the true problem is, it thinks the problem is external. It thinks that the problem is this person or this situation. And if I push them away, then that's going to solve the problem. That's the aversion, where the mind is averse to its own painful feelings, and it thinks the way to solve it is to push this away. So that doesn't solve the problem. But what aversion is it's the opposite side of craving. It's because of craving and clinging that the mind has aversion, because the mind craves for one particular thing, and if I get that, I get pleasant feelings. But if I don't get that craving, fulfilled, then I get these painful feelings in the unenlightened state. And now when that painful feelings are rising, the mind misunderstanding the problem and pushes it away, pushes the person or the situation. I'm sure you've done this in your life, thinking that that's going to solve the problem, but you see it doesn't, because you just get irritated or annoyed or frustrated about something else. So aversion and craving and clinging, they're the opposite. They're two sides of the same coin. That on one side of the coin, you got craving. And when that's arising, if you get what you want, you get the pleasant feelings. If you don't get what you want, you get the painful feelings, and you'll tend to push away. And what you're learning on the path to enlightenment is that doesn't solve the problem, that you need to eliminate your craving. If you eliminate your craving, then you won't be having the painful feelings. You won't be having those to be able to then want to push away. Because if you keep pushing away, that's not going to solve the problem. You've got to address the real problem. The real cause is the craving, desire, attachment. So by addressing the true problem, that's what will fix this. And then you can live harmoniously with all beings rather than pushing away a situation or a person. So where you see the mind doing that, I actually encourage you to put the mind in the situation. So let's say that you really like instrumental music and you despise hard rock music and you just think it's the most horrible thing ever. And when someone pulls up to you in a car and they're playing hard rock music, you go berserk. You get so frustrated, irritated, and annoyed. So what the mind's going to want to do is going to want to try to push away any kind of hard rock music and think that that's going to solve the problem. But you can't permanently be away from this thing. It's going to occasionally be experienced. It's going to occasionally be experienced. So what you would like to do is, instead of pushing it away, is you would like to play some hard rock music and listen to that occasionally and train the mind, hey, you can be peaceful and joyful with this instrumental music, but you can also be peaceful and joyful with this hard rock music too. You still might not choose to listen to it regularly, but you need to put the mind in the situation that it's averse to and train it to be joyful and be peaceful regardless of the sound of the hard rock music, because this is impermanence. And as long as the mind's craving that instrumental music, it's never going to be peaceful, because you're not going to permanently be able to hear instrumental music. There's going to be other musics as well. So you put the mind in the situation that it's averse to, rather than allowing it to push away a person or a situation. You put your mind in that situation, it becomes comfortable, and now you can exist peacefully regardless of what's going on. Mm-hmm.
Can I ask something about that? Mm-hmm. Because then you need to be, I think, is it true that you need to be at some certain level to deal with it, with dealing with that kind of music? Like, I see many people that become enlightened, they take some time to get into the forest and get in some beautiful nature, or in a cave, or just away from all worldly stuff. And I think this might also count for dealing with this kind of music. Do you always need to get into that? Or do you first need to get on some stage and then maybe you can deal with this kind of triggers? Or
yeah.
You understand my question?
Yep. Yeah? What I would encourage someone to do is first build up their practice of the Eightfold Path, where they understand all 8 factors. They're practicing meditation regularly, and they've got all of that on board. Because when you put the mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in, there's going to be discontentedness that's arising, because your craving is being triggered. You're clinging, it's being triggered. So you're going to notice that the discontentedness is going to start arising, and you need to have enough of the 8 factors underway so that you know how to cut that off and let it go, and you have a regular, consistent meditation practice. So when someone's first starting out, I wouldn't suggest they challenge their mind or test their mind this way. But after a period of time, when they get the Eightfold Path underway, this is really wise to be able to put the mind in the situation that you otherwise the mind doesn't want to be in. And just because, since you mentioned like going away to a cave in the forest and stuff like this, you don't need to retreat from society like that in order to get to enlightenment. There's some people who might choose to do those kinds of things, but what the Buddha is teaching you in terms of seclusion, this is what he taught you, is that you spend some time with this being and only this being, so you can be trained to be alone and be comfortable being alone and being with your own thoughts. Sometimes the last thing people are interested in is being alone. They don't enjoy being alone because they have all these intrusive thoughts, and they feel like the way to solve that is just to be around other people all the time, where you can't be with other people all the time. You're going to be alone sometimes. So I encourage people to go to the mall alone occasionally, go out to dinner alone occasionally, go out to the movies alone occasionally, be in love with this being who you are. Because if you don't love yourself and you don't enjoy spending time with yourself, why would anybody else ever enjoy spending time with you, right? So you would like to get to the point where you enjoy spending time alone, and you can enjoy that, but then you can also enjoy being with other people too. Sometimes it's either one or the other. People are just always wanting to be with other people, or sometimes people are just always wanting to be alone. I saw something online recently where there's this person who's locked themselves away for 45 years in this little shack, thinking that that's what they need to do in order to get to enlightenment. You can't go do that and come out enlightened, because you're going to need to learn how to interact with people. You might be pretty peaceful in your shack for 45 years, but as soon as you come out and you start interacting with other people, whoa, the mind can't handle it. It's too much stimulation. So the Buddha did go into the forest for 4 years and train his mind, but he interacted with people because he needed to get food. He needed to come out and spend time with other people to interact. So sometimes when people talk about the Buddha retreating to the forest for 4 years, they have the idea that he must just have been locked away in the forest by himself. But he wasn't, because he can't cook his own food. He didn't make his own food. So he would need to come in contact with other people to get donations of food. So he still interacted with people during those 4 years. So that's what you would like to do too, is get to the point where you can train your mind to be alone and be perfectly content, but be with other people and be content as well. So in terms of putting your mind in these situations, I encourage you to build up the Eightfold Path first, which includes a meditation practice, but it includes other things as well. Yeah, great question. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is chapter 119. Is there someone who would like to read this? We can also, you got it? Okay, I was going to say we can also just stop here too if you guys like, because it's basically 11 o'clock. I usually stop at 11. Yeah. Would you like to read this one? Or would you guys like to stop here? Oh, okay. I was pointing to Kushi, but you're welcome to read it.
Oh, I didn't. You looked at it?
Yeah.
Okay, I already read the last part. This last part. A smile of Nibbana, enlightenment. Sariputta, I understand Nibbana, enlightenment, and the path and way leading to Nibbana, enlightenment. And I also understand how one who has entered this path will, by realizing for himself, with direct knowledge, experience, here and now enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destructions of taints, feathers. Suppose there were a pond with clean, agreeable, cool water, transparent, with smooth banks, delightful, and nearby a dense wood. And then a man, scorched and exhausted by hot weather, weary, parched, and thirsty, came by a path going in one way only towards that same pond. Then a man with good sight, on seeing him, would say, this person so behaves, so conducts himself, has taken such a path that he will come to the same pond, and then later on he sees that he has plunged into the pond, bathed, drunk, and relieved all his distress, fatigue, and fever, and has come out again and is sitting or lying in the woods experiencing exclusively peaceful feelings. So too, by encompassing mind with mind, I understand a certain person thus. This person so behaves, so conducts himself, has taken such a path by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, experience. He here and now will enter upon and reside in the liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of the taint. And then later on, I see that by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, experience, he here and now enters upon and resides in the liberation of mind by wisdom that are taintless with the destruction of taints, and is experiencing exclusively peaceful feelings.
Okay, so here the Buddha is talking a little bit about enlightenment and the path to enlightenment. Here he's talking about the liberation by wisdom. This is liberating the mind. This is how you liberate the mind. You get to wisdom. You need to be able to learn, investigate, examine the teachings, reflect on them, to independently verify, and practice them. That's what leads to your liberation. And by doing so, you get to this point where you've destroyed the taints. The taints are pollutions of mind. The 10 fetters, these are 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered. And this is what's underlying all of his teachings, that the way to get to enlightenment is to purify your mind of those 10 pollutions. And everything that he taught you is to help you to be able to accomplish that. And then he's just kind of giving you a simile to help you understand that. So any questions on this one? Okay, so I don't think we need to read this next one. I think I'm just going to end class here. You guys can read this if you like. It's chapter 120. You can read it in the book, volume 11, and you can see what I wrote about it here. At the end of each one of these set of 10 chapters, there's a link to a class where I've taught online, because I've taught all these things previously. And then that same class is also a podcast. You can click on these from the electronic book, and you can actually see where I've taught these online. So you can actually go through this in a self-paced way as well, because this Pali Canon and English study group, it's a 1.5-year program where I start with volumes 2 going through volume 13. But you can really start it at any point. You can start, even here in volume 11, or if you'd like to do kind of like a self-paced, you can go from volume 2 and kind of go and see the classes where I've taught these. But I suggest that students start with volume 1. That's the best place to start from the very beginning. And I have the same thing in volume 1, that I have these little charts at the very end, or the very table at the very end of each chapter, where you can see classes that I've taught, or a podcast that I've taught on that particular chapter. And starting on the 17th of March, I'm going to be restarting from the very beginning of a group learning program, which is the beginning program. And then every month, the first week of the month, I teach the foundational course and the foundation and the path to enlightenment. And I live stream it, and you can join by Zoom as well. So no matter where you are in the world, you'll be able to learn the foundational teachings of the Buddha and get help as you need help. So thank you guys for joining. I appreciate that you're here. And it's wonderful that you guys had this opportunity to sit through a class where there's been a saw going on and off all throughout the class, give you guys a chance to not crave to hear permanent, certain sound. This is really good training for your mind. I didn't ask them to do this, but it's really wonderful that they did. Sometimes teachers do those kinds of things with their students to help them to be able to let go of any kind of craving. So this is really wonderful that you guys had this experience. And even those of you guys online, I'm sure you can hear the saw as well. So this is really wonderful for you to be able to experience this impermanence and train your mind just to be peaceful and joyful no matter what's going on in the world around you. So perhaps we'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee khap. Sawadee khap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.